I caught up with Richard White this week just to talk about that thirst for knowledge.
I think that the path, although it seems quite strange, was at the time the steps were quite logical. And all I was really doing was taking those skills that I had and then adding new skills to it and experimenting with that new thing. And one of the other characteristics perhaps is this idea that I was never really afraid of failure. I was prepared to take a risk, moderate that risk or mitigate that risk, try things, reverse back out if it didn't work and try something else. And so I never went in feeling that it was going to be a problem. I felt I'll just experiment, do it that way, try that way. Oh, that works, let's go there.
And there's something else here which I think is real, and that is a very sharp focus on your own skills. That goes even to when you were in the band, when you realised that you may not have been the best band in the world, so you moved on to something else, which was repairing and getting the best out of guitars for other people.
I needed to take my skills and feed myself and pay my rent. So it's pretty tough when you're a young rock and roll band and there's a lot of them around. Everybody's being taken advantage of by the industry. It's a pretty tough industry. But I thought that fundamental skills can be reused. And I was a good player, so I had good guitars, and I was showing my friends, backstage at various gigs, I did this with the guitar, and suddenly people started giving me their work and I started repairing their guitars. And I thought, oh, this is actually, quite commercial and actually making more money than I'm making in the band, so let me do that.
But there's one other aspect of that, and that was the notion of being able to scale something.
Yeah.
In other words, this quest to succeed is the ability to replicate something many times over, hopefully not really devouring enormous amounts of assets at the same time.
Yeah, so when you're doing something which is a skilled artisan, you're effectively limited by the amount of hours in the day and the work your two hands can do. And I came to realise that business was called Rock Repairs, because I repaired guitars, rock guitars, I suppose. It was brilliant business. It was very profitable, but it was going to be limited by the number of hours in the day. And so a friend asked me to build some lighting equipment for him, and using my father's workshop and my physical skills that I'd learned from my father, I started building them. The moment I started building these things, I went, this isn't right. These aren't built properly. They're not well built. They can't be replicated in mass, and they're poor quality from the design point of view. So I actually figured out many things, even how to cast aluminium cast to make it more efficient, how to weld them different, how to use different types of tubing, how to build the stands more strongly. And I got lots and lots of orders, and we actually had to move that took over from the guitar repair, because that became my main business, which was very scalable. We moved 4 different factories because of the growth of the business.
But then if we fast forward 20 or 30 years and we come to WiseTech, the business that you're in, which has acquired the enormous wealth, that's the ultimate in the scalable business, because it's a piece of software that can be sold many times over.
No physical assets. The inputs are all human endeavour, the mind, and solving complex problems in a very new and better way. And actually, I had really had 5 businesses before: the musician, guitar repair, lighting equipment, building a wholesaler, and realising that I was changing my mind all the time. And at the beginning of WiseTech, I made a very, very distinct decision. I actually had read In Search of Excellence, Tom Peters. And the one thing that stood out from that book was stick to the knitting. I went, I'm not doing that. I keep on changing. So instead of getting it working and then selling it, I said, this is my last business. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and I'm going to make it into a gangbusters business. And so I basically just kept on going a different way.
Okay, so now WiseTech has got around 2,000 software engineers in your employment.
Correct.
Finding those people is very difficult, especially when Australia is going backwards in mathematics, going backwards in science education right now. How does Australia stay at the forefront so that we get more companies such as yours emerging in the future, so that somebody else can be equally as successful as you have been?
Well, this, of course, is a passion of mine and a very strong interest of WiseTech, so we're quite aligned in our interest in education. I think that the way that we need to go forward here is to re-educate people on the value of a career in physics, in mathematics, in software engineering. There are many parts of this, and it's not like you have to learn software engineering or software development as your core skill early on. So I didn't actually start programming until I was 25. At Jan's, as part of the lighting equipment, I had to discover how to write software. And it wasn't like, oh, well, that's just another thing to do. Let's just keep doing it. And I did it days, nights and weekends. And eventually, over a year or two, I became quite good at it. That was the input that made WiseTech, to be fair.
So in other words, that's the vocational training, the on-the-job training that a lot of people forget about once they're in the job.
And actually, I think we're getting it wrong with our education system, because the education of the theory isn't enough to produce a high quality skill set. You actually, like what I say is that software engineering is a performance art. It requires practice from the earliest days. If you look at the great people that are coming out of high school and going into a technical degree at university, the really good ones have been playing with computers in their bedroom since they were 14. They've been learning Python or some other language since they're 16. And they're writing websites and mobile apps and other things. And by the time they're out of high school, many of them are actually already very employable. And we actually want to find those people and we want to give them an accelerated career. We've got this new project, we call it Earn and Learn. So we're trying to develop a mechanism where the universities can allow them to work to be studying part-time, about half the course load, and working at a company like WiseTech full-time. So instead of spending 3 or 4 years in desperately seeking amount of money to keep yourself going with your parents and working at flipping burgers or whatever it is, you actually end up having a very successful, highly paid career and developing that career as you're learning the theory and you're learning with professionals around you. You can see it working, you can hear it happening, you can ask questions, you can develop the flex of those skills. And that's a very different way of educating. So it's combining that idea of on-the-job training with theoretical, deep education.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to see the full story when the documentary comes out. But one thing I do know is that your quest for learning, your thirst for learning, really has not changed even to this day. Richard White, always good to chat to you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ross.